What happens when a man refuses to bend beneath the crushing weight of empires? When his voice thunders louder than the drums of fear, his dreams soar beyond the iron bars of borders, and his spirit blazes brighter than the darkest oppression. Patrice Lumumba was that man, a radiant force, a revolutionary whose heart beat for a free, united, and dignified Congo. Born in the shadows of a colonized land, he rose from a humble village to become the Congo's first prime minister, a beacon of hope for a people yearning to reclaim their stolen future. But 6 months after igniting a nation's soul, the powers that feared his truth struck back. He was betrayed, beaten, tortured, and executed. His body was dismembered, dissolved in acid, meant to vanish without a trace. They thought they could erase him. They thought they could silence his name. They were wrong. This is not just the story of a man. It's the story of what happens when courage dares to challenge the mighty, when one voice becomes a chorus for millions, when a dream refuses to die under the weight of betrayal. This is the story of Patrice Lumumba, a man who lit a fire in the heart of Africa, a fire that still burns in every soul fighting for justice. His life, his struggle, his death, they are a warning, a mirror, a call to rise. If you believe history should be told raw, unfiltered, and fearless, if you believe the stories of the silence deserve to echo through the ages, then hit that subscribe button. Join us to uncover the truths they tried to bury, the voices they tried to erase. Because the past isn't just history, it's a battle cry, a reminder that silence serves empires, but stories make them tremble. A land in chain, the Congo. A land of breathtaking beauty and unimaginable wealth sprawled across the heart of Africa like a living tapestry. Its rivers shimmered with flecks of gold, its soil glittered with diamonds, and its depths pulsed with cobalt, copper, and uranium. Resources that could have made it a paradise on Earth. But for nearly a century, this land was no Eden. It was a prison, shackled by the brutal grip of Belgian colonial rule. In the late 19th century, King Leopold II, driven by greed cloaked in the guise of philanthropy, claimed the Congo as his personal fiefdom. He called it the Congo Free State, a grotesque mockery of the word free. Under his reign, the Congolese people were enslaved, forced to harvest rubber, ivory, and minerals for European profit. Villages were burned, hands severed as punishment for those who failed to meet quotas, and entire communities were torn apart. The death toll climbed into the millions. Some estimate as many as 10 million lives lost to Leopold's avarice. By the time Belgium formally annexed the Congo in 1908, the scars of this genocide were etched deep into the land and its people. The Congolese were not citizens but subjects, their lives reduced to labor for foreign masters. Children were ripped from their mothers to toil in mines, their small hands bleeding as they dug for minerals that powered Europe's industrial boom. Men were whipped into submission, their bodies broken under the weight of forced labor. Women bore the double burden of work and loss, their dignities stripped by a system that saw them as less than human. The Belgians justified this horror with the lie of a civilizing mission, claiming they were bringing progress to a savage land. But it was theft, robbery of land, resources, and humanity itself. The Congo's wealth flowed out, building palaces in Brussels, while its people starved. Schools for Congolese children were rare, and those that existed were run by missionaries who taught subservience, not empowerment. Hospitals were for white settlers, not the black workers who died in droves. The Congo was a land of paradox, rich beyond measure, yet its people were impoverished, their spirits caged by the weight of colonial oppression. Into this world of shadows, on July 2nd, 1925, in the small village of Katakokombe in the Sankuru region, a boy named Patrice Emery Lumumba was born. His family of the Tetela people were farmers, their lives tied to the rhythms of the earth, planting, harvesting, surviving. Katakokombe was a place of mud brick homes and endless toil, where the scent of wood smoke mingled with the damp earth and the distant rumble of colonial trains carrying Congo's riches to the coast. was a constant reminder of exploitation. Patrice's parents, Julien and François, were not wealthy, not powerful, but they carried a quiet resilience, a pride in their heritage that they passed to their son. Young Patrice, one of 4 siblings, grew up in a world where survival demanded strength, but dreams demanded courage. From an early age, he was different, curious, restless, a boy whose eyes seemed to see beyond the horizon of his village. The world told Patrice he was nothing, a black child in a colonized land destined for invisibility, his future limited to manual labor or, at best, a low-level clerical job under the watchful gaze of Belgian overseers. But Lumumba refused to accept that lie. He was a sponge, soaking up knowledge wherever he could find it. By the dim flicker of oil lamps, he taught himself to read, his fingers tracing the pages of borrowed books, philosophy, history, poetry. These were his weapons, forging a mind that would one day challenge empires. He read of Rousseau's Social Contract, Voltaire's Critiques of Tyranny, and the revolutions that toppled kings in America and France. He discovered Africa's own heroes, Ethiopia's Menelik II, who defeated Italian colonizers at Addis Ababa, the whispers of resistance from the Mau Mau in Kenya, the growing voice of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, calling for a united Africa. Every injustice he witnessed, the casual cruelty of Belgian overseers, the racial slurs hurled like stones, the theft of his people's land, stoked a fire in his soul. He saw the truth. The Congo's chains were not just physical but mental, and true freedom would come only when his people believed in their own power. As a teenager, Lumumba attended mission schools where he excelled despite the condescension of colonial teachers. The missionaries taught obedience, urging Congolese students to accept their place in the colonial hierarchy. But Patrice questioned everything. Why were his people denied the education given to white settlers' children? Why did the Congo's wealth enrich Europe while its people languished? His teachers called him insolent, but his peers saw a spark, a boy who dared to dream beyond the limits imposed on him. After school, he took a job as a post office clerk in Stanleyville, now Kisangani, a humble role that belied the volcano within him. By day, he sorted letters. By night, he wrote fiery essays, organized secret meetings, and spoke to anyone who would listen. In smoky backrooms and under the shade of mango trees, he shared his vision of a Congo free from foreign rule, a land where its people could stand tall. The whispers of Pan-Africanism, the dream of a united, liberated Africa, found fertile ground in his heart. He corresponded with intellectuals across the continent, attended conferences in Accra and Addis Ababa, and began to see himself as part of a larger struggle, a rising tide of African awakening, the spark of revolution. By the late 1950s, the Congo was a tinderbox, teetering on the edge of revolution. Across Africa, the winds of change were blowing. Ghana had won independence in 1957, Guinea in 1958, and the cry for freedom echoed from Algeria to Kenya. In the Congo, the Congolese people were no longer silent. Urban workers went on strike. Rural farmers refused to pay colonial taxes, and students marched in the streets, their voices rising in defiance. The Belgian authorities, sensing the growing unrest, tightened their grip. But the more they squeezed, the more the people resisted. Into this ferment stepped Patrice Lumumba, now a man in his 30s. His voice no longer a murmur, but a torrent of oratory that could shake the earth. In 1958, Lumumba founded the Congolese National Movement, MNC, a party that dared to dream of independence, not as a gift bestowed by colonial masters, but as a right seized by the will of the people. Unlike other Congolese parties, which were often divided by region or ethnicity, the MNC was national, uniting disparate groups under a single banner: freedom, unity, dignity. Lumumba's speeches were electric, pulsing with the heartbeat of a nation. "We are not your monkeys," he thundered, his words a blade cutting through the lies of colonial superiority. "The Congo belongs to us. Its land, its rivers, its wealth." From dusty villages to crowded market squares, His voice carried, galvanizing farmers, workers, students, and elders. Men stood taller, women spoke bolder, and children dreamed bigger. His words were not just rhetoric, they were a call to awaken, to rise, to reclaim what had been stolen. Lumumba's charisma was magnetic, his presence commanding. He was not tall or imposing, but his eyes burned with conviction, and his voice, clear, resonant, unyielding, could silence a room or ignite a crowd. He spoke in French, Lingala, and Swahili, weaving together the languages of the Congo to reach every heart. He told stories of their ancestors, of a time before the Belgians came, when the Congo was a land of kings and queens. He painted a vision of a future where Congolese children would go to school, where hospitals would serve all, where the wealth of the land would lift its people. His speeches were not just words, they were a lifeline, pulling a nation from despair to hope. The Belgian authorities, trembling at the sound of his name, saw Lumumba as a threat to their empire. They tried to silence him, arresting him on charges of inciting unrest. They threw him into prison, chained his body to break his spirit. But Lumumba was no ordinary man. Even behind bars, his influence grew. His letters, smuggled out by loyal supporters, were read aloud in villages and towns. His ideas spread like seeds on the wind, taking root in the hearts of the Congolese people. The more the Belgians tried to suppress him, the larger his legend grew. He became a symbol, not just a man, but a movement, a wildfire that no cage could contain. Then, in a twist of fate, the winds of independence reached the Congo. Across Africa, colonial powers were retreating, pressured by the rising tide of nationalism and moral weight of their crimes. Belgium, fearing a prolonged war like the one France faced in Algeria, agreed to grant the Congo independence. In 1960, Lumumba was released from prison, just in time for the nation's first democratic election. The people, their voices rising like a tidal wave, chose him. Patrice Lumumba, the self-taught revolutionary, the post office clerk turned prophet, as their first prime minister. It was a moment of triumph, a fleeting glimpse of hope in a land long shrouded in despair. On June 30th, 1960, the Congo was declared independent, and Lumumba stood at the helm, a leader tasked with building a nation from the ashes of colonial rule. The speech that shook the world. June 30th, 1960. Leopoldville, the capital, buzzed with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of rain and the hum of expectation. Congolese flags, blue with a golden star, fluttered alongside Belgian ones, an uneasy symbol of transition. Thousands gathered, their faces a mix of pride, hope, and wariness. Independence had come, but what did it mean in a land still shadowed by its colonizers? Belgium's King Baudouin took the stage, his voice dripping with arrogance as he delivered a speech that whitewashed history. He praised the civilizing mission of his ancestors, as if the Congolese owed their freedom to the same hands that had chained them for a century. He spoke of Leopold II as a visionary, ignoring the millions who died under his rule. The crowd shifted, their pride wounded, their patience fraying. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Then, without warning, Patrice Lumumba rose. No script, no prepared remarks, just a heart full of truth and a voice that refused to be silenced. He strode to the podium, his eyes blazing with defiance, his presence commanding the attention of every soul in the room. He was not scheduled to speak, but he would not be silent. What followed was a speech that would echo across the world, a moment that would define his legacy and seal his fate. Lumumba spoke of the Congo's pain, the forced labor that broke bodies, the racial humiliations that scarred souls, the theft of land and dignity that had defined a century of colonial rule. We have known ironies, insults, blows that we endured morning, noon, and night because we were Negroes, he declared, his voice steady but searing. Who will forget the rifle fire from which so many of our brothers perished, or the cells into which those who refused to submit to a regime of oppression were thrown? His words were raw, unfiltered. A blade of truth cutting through the lies of the civilizing mission. He named the brutality, the exploitation, the theft of a nation's soul. He spoke of the Congolese people's resilience, their right to dignity, their claim to the wealth of their land. This independence of the Congo, he said, we are proud to have fought for it, and we will defend it with our lives. His voice, carried live on international radio, was a seismic shock. Africans across the continent, from Accra to Nairobi, from Addis Ababa to Dakar, roared in celebration, their hearts swelling with pride. In Ghana, students poured into the streets, chanting Lumumba's name. In Algeria, freedom fighters raised their fists in solidarity. In Harlem, black activists listened in awe, seeing in Lumumba a brother in their own struggle. The speech was a cry of liberation, a declaration that the Congo and Africa would no longer bow. But the West was stunned, outraged. To them, Lumumba's speech was not a triumph, but an affront. How dare a black man speak so boldly, so directly in the presence of a European king? How dare he expose their crimes on a global stage? In Brussels, officials seethed. In Washington and London, diplomats exchanged worried glances. Lumumba was no longer just a leader. He was a threat, a man who dared to speak truth to power. In that moment, he became more than a prime minister. He became a symbol of African defiance, a voice that refused to be silenced, a spark that could ignite a continent. The empire strikes back. Empires do not relinquish their grip without a fight. Belgium never truly left the Congo. Their troops lingered, a menacing shadow, and their control over the nation's wealth, especially the mineral-rich province of Katanga, remained unyielding. Katanga, with its copper, cobalt, and uranium, was the jewel of Belgian interests, a prize they would not surrender. Its mines powered Europe's industries, and crucially, supplied uranium for America's nuclear arsenal. With Belgian money and Western whispers, Katanga seceded just days after independence. Led by Moise Tshombe, a Congolese politician backed by foreign interests, the secession tore the young nation apart, plunging it into chaos. Into this fracture stepped Joseph Mobutu, the young army chief, his ambition sharper than a blade. Mobutu was a man of charm and cunning, a former journalist who had risen through the ranks of the Congolese army. But his loyalty was not to Lumumba or the Congo. It was to power and to the foreign hands that promised it. The Cold War cast a long shadow over the Congo, and Lumumba's bold vision of a sovereign nation alarmed the West. The United States and United Kingdom, locked in a global struggle with the Soviet Union, saw Africa as a battleground. They feared Lumumba's independence, his refusal to align fully with the West. Whispers of his supposed Soviet leanings began to circulate, though his only allegiance was to his people. The CIA and MI6 labeled him a communist, a danger to Western interests, despite his calls for non-alignment and African unity. The United Nations, sent to the Congo as a so-called peacekeeping force, proved useless. Their troops stood idly by as Katanga seceded and the nation fractured. Lumumba pleaded for their help to restore order, to protect the Congo's sovereignty, but the UN refused, citing neutrality. In reality, their inaction served the interests of the West, leaving Lumumba isolated in a treacherous game of international politics. He was a leader with a mandate, but no allies. A king on a chessboard surrounded by wolves. He turned to the Soviet Union for aid, not out of ideology, but out of desperation, seeking planes and supplies to quell the secession. This move only fueled Western paranoia, cementing their determination to remove him. The noose tightened. In September 1960, Mobutu, backed by the CIA and Belgian officials, staged a coup. Lumumba was placed under house arrest, his dream of a united Congo slipping through his fingers like sand. Surrounded by UN troops who were meant to protect him but instead confined him, he was a prisoner in his own capital. Yet Lumumba's spirit remained unbroken. In a daring bid to reignite the revolution, he escaped, slipping into the dense jungle, hoping to reach Stanleyville, where his loyal supporters waited, ready to rally. The journey was perilous, a race through rivers and forests under the cover of night, but the jungle had eyes, and his enemies had long arms. On December 1st, 1960, he was captured near the Sankuru River, betrayed by those he trusted. Dragged back to Leopoldville, he was paraded through the streets, beaten and humiliated. A stark warning to any who dared defy the new order. Behind closed doors, a sinister plot unfolded. Secret cables, coded messages flowed between the CIA, MI6, and Belgian officials. Declassified documents later revealed the chilling extent of their conspiracy. The CIA's station chief in Leopoldville sent urgent messages to Washington calling Lumumba a target who needed to be neutralized. Belgian officials, fearing the loss of Katanga's wealth, urged his elimination. The message was clear, unambiguous. Lumumba must disappear. His voice was too powerful, his vision too dangerous, his ability to inspire a continent too great a threat to the global order. The final betrayal. January 17, 1961. The final act of betrayal played out in the heart of Katanga, the stronghold of Lumumba's enemies. He was flown to Elizabethville, now Lubumbashi, a city controlled by Chombe and his Belgian backers. No justice awaited him there, only a grim reckoning. In a remote villa under the cold, indifferent gaze of Belgian officers and Congolese collaborators, Lumumba was tortured. His screams pierced the night, a haunting cry for a dream deferred. They beat him, mocked him, tore at his dignity. Then, in a clearing under a starless sky, a firing squad raised their rifles. The shots rang out, and Patrice Lumumba, the man who dared to dream of a free Africa, fell silent. But the horror didn't end there. His body, the vessel of so much hope, so much defiance, was dismembered, then dissolved in acid. No grave, no trace, only a void where a giant once stood. They thought they could erase him. They thought silence would bury his name. They were wrong. The news of Lumumba's death spread like wildfire, igniting outrage across Africa and the Third World. In Accra, Ghana, thousands marched, their voices chanting his name. In Cairo, Egyptian radio broadcasts denounced the West's complicity. In Havana, Fidel Castro hailed Lumumba as a hero of the global struggle against imperialism. In Harlem, black activists held vigils, seeing in his death a reflection of their own fight against oppression. From Algiers to Moscow, from Delhi to Beijing, his murder was a clarion call, a reminder that the fight for freedom came at a deadly cost. Lumumba's death was not just a murder. It was a declaration of war on the dream of African sovereignty, a warning to any who dared challenge the global order. For decades, the West spun lies to cover their tracks. Belgium denied involvement, claiming Lumumba's death was a Congolese affair. The United States pointed fingers at Mobutu, ignoring their own role in his rise. The UN, complicit in its inaction, remained silent. But truth, like water, finds a way. In the 1970s, declassified CIA documents began to surface, revealing the agency's role in orchestrating the coup and targeting Lumumba. A 1960 cable from CIA Director Alan Dulles explicitly called for his removal as a matter of urgent priority. Belgian officials too were implicated, their communications exposing a coordinated effort to eliminate the Prime Minister. In 2002, Belgium issued a formal apology, admitting moral responsibility for Lumumba's death, a belated, hollow gesture that could not undo the crime. A Belgian police officer later confessed to disposing of Lumumba's body, describing how he and his colleagues used acid to erase all traces. The truth, long buried, was undeniable. Lumumba's murder was a conspiracy, a cold-blooded act by Western powers desperate to maintain their grip on Africa's wealth, a legacy that lives. Patrice Lumumba was more than a man. He was a symbol of resistance, of African dignity, of the unyielding fight against oppression. His death did not extinguish his dream. It amplified it. Across Africa, his name became a rallying cry. In Tanzania, Julius Nyerere invoked Lumumba's vision of Pan-African unity. In South Africa, anti-apartheid activists drew strength from his courage. In the Congo, his supporters continued the fight, though Mobutu's brutal regime, propped up by Western aid, ruled for decades, plundering the nation's wealth while the people suffered. Lumumba's legacy lives on in the streets named after him from Kinshasa to Nairobi. It lives in the schools that bear his name, where children learn of a man who dared to dream big. It lives in the countless Africans who carry his name, Patrice Emery Lumumba, passed down like a torch through generations. Every time a young African stands against injustice, Lumumba lives. Every time truth challenges power, his voice echoes. His story is not just history, it's a warning of what empires do to those who defy them. It's a mirror reflecting the courage it takes to stand tall. It's a call to action, urging us to keep the flame of justice alive. They tried to erase him. They failed, because stories like his don't die. They burn brighter with every telling, grow stronger with every voice that speaks his name. Lumumba's dream of a free, united, dignified Africa lives in every heart that refuses to bow, every soul that dares to fight. This is more than history, this is a challenge. Will you let his story fade, or will you carry it forward? Will you let silence win, or will you make empires tremble? If this story shook you, if it lit a fire in your soul, don't let it end here. Speak his name, share his story, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. Join us in keeping the flame of truth alive, in ensuring that Patrice Lumumba's voice echoes through the ages. Because silence serves empires, but stories tear them down. Together, let's make sure the world never forgets the man who dared to dream, the man